Coming to Kickstarter, it's The Legend of Kingdom Come. This feature documentary is an origin story about the beloved 90s-era graphic novel Kingdom Come, going behind the scenes and inside the minds of its creators, writer Mark Waid and comic book art legend Alex Ross. The film traces the influence of the comics history through the present day, exploring the roots of pop culture's most vibrant medium in the 21st century, featuring a wide range of comic luminaries reflecting on the book and the industry. That's coming to Kickstarter, The Legend of Kingdom Come. Word Balloon is also presented by my listeners, the League of Word Balloon listeners. The help that I get via contributions from Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. You hear the entertainment that I provide from Word Balloon every day, that I do a new episode. I am very fortunate to have the great creators of comics and pop culture willing to come on and give you great entertainment. I hope you will consider making an actual cash contribution via Patreon, even $1 a month. But really, if Word Balloon is worth the price of a comic book a month to you, it would be greatly appreciated if you slide that extra money you would put on an issue of a comic book to Word Balloon via Patreon. Patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you, League of Word Balloon listeners. There we go. All right. Excellent. Are we ready back there? We are ready? Excellent. All right, we will begin. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I hope you're enjoying the weekend here at Mohegan Sun and Terrificon. It's been great for me. My name's John Suntress. I host a podcast called Word Balloon. It's at wordballoon.com, and I do a lot of interviews with creators and filmmakers and TV people as well. And this is going to be great because today we are celebrating 60 years of the man without fear himself, Daredevil. We have a great lineup here representing really Daredevil. I mean, unfortunately we can't resurrect Bill Everett to come, who drew the first issue back in the day. But we're going pretty early into Daredevil's career because really what we have is, first of all, I'll go in order of the dais on the far right there. That's the editor-in-chief of Marvel, C.B. Cebulski, everybody. Next, a guy who had a great run on Daredevil, really great stuff, and one of the few guys, and we're going to talk about it on the panel, that actually got to write, can we call it almost a final story within your arc? Or we'll get into it, Charles, absolutely. And I always like to say, I get to do my Ian McKellen imitation and go, hello, Charles. Charles Soule, everybody. Mackalicious. I'm glad you're here, man. We need another chair, we need another water. Fantastic. I'm glad you're on the panel, man. Jeez. All right, settling himself, because we'll wait till he's all settled and everything. But a guy that, man, great stuff on Daredevil as a writer and an artist, and his great collaboration with Brian Bendis, but also introducing Echo for us and stuff. Everybody, David Mack. A great Marvel editor and writer as well, and a man who was overseeing Daredevil during the Frank Miller years. Ralph Macchio, everybody. Tremendous writer of Daredevil who went a different way from Frank Miller and gave us a lighter tone Daredevil with Chris Samnee back then. Mark Waid. And the current artist on Daredevil, everybody, and doing a hell of a job, Aaron Kuder. Yeah. Oh, man. So I suppose, Ralph, we should maybe, because you represent the earliest iterations on the panel, you wrote Daredevil as well, correct?
No, Daredevil is a character I've never written.
Oh, excuse me. All right. Well, tell me about that. All right. Well, I am interested because were you editing Daredevil when, was it Roger Mackenzie was writing it and Frank was drawing it?
Yeah, I was under Denny O'Neil at the time. And then after that, Frank, of course, took over. So I was there for that entire first run with Frank.
Wow.
And then afterwards, I was given Daredevil to edit. I had Denny O'Neil on for a while. And then when Denny decided to leave, people were not sure who's going to take over. So secretly, I called Frank, and I knew that he had more Daredevil stories in him. And when I contacted him, David Mazzucchelli was doing a book, was penciling a book, and he was doing a fantastic job. And Frank said, well, give me a couple of minutes and I'll pick up a story. So he called me back 5 minutes later and he said, how about this Born Again thing I got? So we did Born Again. He worked with David Mazzucchelli, and after that, Frank went off to do Batman Year One, which he said he couldn't have done if he hadn't been able to come on and do Born Again. And then I got John Romita Jr. and Ann Ascending on for a good long run. And then Dan Chichester came on after that. That's kind of an underrated run, but he did some great stuff on that. So I was on DD for almost 10 years.
Wow, man. I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of some of those eras and stuff, because I really am curious. But I want to keep, at least for the opening, give everyone an opening statement of their runs and everything. So then I guess chronologically, David Mack would be next. David, this was really early in Marvel kind of refiguring itself out. You were part of that wave with Mark Millar and Brian Bendis, and you guys were really coming in. And I know we were all knocked out when we first saw your art, but Joe saw it even earlier, really enjoying Kabuki and things you were doing. Tell me about getting the Daredevil kit.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was Joe Quesada. I had met him at a convention in 1995, Heroes Con, and I gave him my Kabuki collection. And he called me up and said he really liked my writing in it and he'd like to work together someday. And there were a couple ideas that he had that didn't pan out with his own critter and company called Event. And then cut to, I think, 1997, he called and told me that he and Jimmy Palmiotti were going to be running 4 titles at Marvel called Marvel Knights, with Kevin Smith starting as writer on Daredevil and asked me to take over as a writer after Kevin Smith. So it was, it was a real challenge for me because I had written for other artists before, but I'd never written a character I had not created, right? So I got that job because of Kabuki, which was all creator-owned, and I was very comfortable writing something that you've created yourself. So it was kind of a twofold challenge for me because you want to be respectful to the rich history and mythology that that character has and the creators have brought before. So you've got to fit into that and make that work. But you also have to add something new, some kind of new vocabulary as well, right? Otherwise, no point in doing it. So that was a really interesting challenge for me. It was a really formative time for me, and it was just a great opportunity, to kind of continue where I read Daredevil as a kid. I started with the Frank Miller, Klaus Janson era that Ralph was talking about, and I guess that was, you came a little after that, right? The Janson era.
Yeah, I was Denny's assistant on that. So
Yeah.
I was there with Frank really from the beginning, before he was even writing.
Oh, right on. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my introduction to Daredevil. So for me, I think a lot of people, Daredevil there's many incarnations of Daredevil, dimensions to him, but for a lot of people, it's the Daredevil they first are introduced to that has a lasting mark on them. So I was kind of continuing where my childhood version of me left off, reading it, and that was an incredible experience to do, to write a character that you read as a kid.
That's great, and I could tell you, obviously, seeing your art, and it was, again, such a departure from traditional comic book art that it really was exciting. And in that same way that Sienkiewicz, when he did his Love and Glory, am I right, Ralph? Was that the graphic novel?
Yeah, I just say one thing. One
Please.
thing I'm very pleased about during my long run on Daredevil was that I was able to pair Frank Miller with 3 artists that he really was able to do incredible work with. And of course, the first was David Mazzucchelli, again, whom he went off to DC with and did Batman Year One.
Batman Year One.
And then John Romita Jr., who they went off together and did the Daredevil Man Without Fear, that series, which originally was supposed to be a screenplay that Frank brought to us. And he decided that it just wasn't working as a screenplay, or he couldn't sell it, so he brought it to us. And the third artist was Bill Sienkiewicz. So it's great to pair him with all three of those guys, because together they did some incredible work.
No question. So again, chronologically, then based on the panel, I think Waid is next. And Mark, who preceded you on Daredevil?
Andy Diggle, I believe.
Oh, okay, sure, absolutely.
It was for a very brief period, and then before that it was Brew Baker, and before that it was Bendis. And,
yes.
And all these gentlemen did amazing runs on Daredevil, all of them, but they all had the same sort of tonality that carried over. Frank really is the first guy who came along and made a crime noir.
Yes.
And it was awesome. I was reading that stuff as a kid like everybody else, and I loved that material. But when I got the call from editor Steve Wacker, who had worked with it at DC, he said, we know that's not exactly your wheelhouse, and it's okay if you want to push it back more into a superhero genre. And I wasn't doing it out of any defiance. It was just that I said, I'm not capable of writing that sort of dark crime noir. It's great, it's awesome, that's just not my wheelhouse. So can we go back a little bit, dial the thing back a little bit further, and not make it lighter, because I will go to my grave, I will die on this hill saying that horrible, awful things happened to Matt during the run. But it was more about how he dealt with them, and then working with Paulo Rivera and Marcos Martin, and then of course the great Chris Samnee. We had a really good run,
yes,
and really happy with the way it worked out.
That's excellent, man.
And then Charles just dropped the piano and everything we did. And
but that's good though, because truly, and obviously it depends on how it responds to us as the audience. But sometimes it is like, all right, now I want a different facet or whatever. I mean, I read enough Silver Age and Bronze Age Daredevil prior to Mackenzie and Frank to appreciate a different and a more swashbuckling Daredevil, if you will. So if
let me just,
please.
I just want to clarify for those listening at home who couldn't see the facial expressions. I kid.
Yes.
I kid. Everybody who comes on the book gets to have their own take and gets to start from wherever they need to start, because that's otherwise you're just doing karaoke from the last person who came along.
Very true. All right, Charles. Let's talk about it, because but they're really, Charles, truly one of my favorite runs, and I really appreciate it. Well, first of all, Charles, your own background as a lawyer yourself.
Well, that's where I was gonna start. So I am, as far as I know, the only former practicing attorney who's written Daredevil. I had a law practice for many years. It overlapped with the start of my time at Marvel. And so when I came on board, that was something that the then editor-in-chief, Axel Alonso, was like, this is interesting, and maybe there's some projects that you could fit for. And the first one that lined up for me along those lines was She-Hulk. And so I did a run with Javier Pulido and Ron Wimberly. That was one of my favorite creative things I've ever done. It landed really well. People really seemed to like it. And one of the things that really worked in it was the fact that I leaned into She-Hulk being an attorney, because I could write some of those issues with a level of expertise, which is not to say that the other Daredevil writers weren't able to do that. I mean, Mark nailed a lot. You got a lot right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Way to throw shade.
So Daredevil was always circling around as something that maybe I would get the chance to do. And so when Mark was wrapping up his run, Axel came to me and said, would you like to take it over? And I said, absolutely. But I was presented with a real problem, which was that in Mark's excellent run that I truly loved. Like it made me so happy. I think there were some of the school children trapped in the snow issue. Like there's so many amazing issues of Mark's run. But he took away his secret identity. And while that was a really, really smart decision for his run, one of the things that I really wanted to focus on in my run, understandably, was Matt Murdock, attorney. And there was no way that Matt Murdock could be running around on rooftops, beating people up publicly, known as Daredevil, and then go stand in a courtroom the next day and try to defend criminals. It was impossible. So I had to find a way to put his secret identity back in the bottle. And I did through elaborate Marvel Universe continuity craziness, Purple Man stuff, whatever. It doesn't matter. But the reason I did that was not to trample on the great work that Mark had done, or even other people who had pulled him away from, say, his Catholicism or his legal work, or any of the other elements that other writers didn't want to focus on as much as I did. it really is, you have to write the character that you want to write, the Daredevil that you want to write, because otherwise there's no point in doing the job at all. You have to bring something that only you can bring to it. And so for me, the law part was a big part of it. I wanted to focus on sort of the real world that Matt found himself in. It was very much a world outside his window kind of deal, which a lot of Marvel books tend to do. And I had a phenomenal time. But I also think, I'm sure some of us will start, this is a topic that's going to come up, but the handoffs on Daredevil are very fun, because one of the things that writers like to do is to leave the next writer in a terrible place that they have to figure their way out of. And so I had basically there were lots of things about Mark's run that I had to figure out how to handle at the start of mine, and then I did the same thing for Chip Zdarsky, who followed up my run. And it's one of the greatest things about writing Daredevil. It's screwing over the next guy.
All the writers over the years that I've talked to about that have said that with glee. All right, Daredevil's in jail. Your turn. Yeah. All right, how am I going to do this? But great runs. And I'm so glad you guys acknowledge, like, Brubaker, Diggle, Bendis, certainly, and everything. Great stuff. Chip just did a great run. Now Aaron is in the midst of the current run. And CB, I'll ask you, and forgive me, I have it on my iPad, but right now I'm recording. The current writer, his name?
Saladin Ahmed.
Saladin Ahmed. So how, if you don't mind speaking, like, how did he get the writing gig, and why him for Daredevil, if you don't mind giving us?
Well, speaking of leaving the character in terrible places.
Yes.
Here.
In hell. And that was what the box that we had to find a writer who was going to bring him out of. And Saladin came in and pitched this idea, not to spoil it if you haven't reading, about, Matt becoming the priest and the seven sins, and it was the perfect kind of solution to the box that he was in, and a different direction for Daredevil. And then, Aaron was, he wrapped up Guardians of the Galaxy at that point. I forget exactly right before, but said
Avengers Forever.
Avengers Forever with Jason, that's right. And said he would be perfect for it. And that's where we just put that team together, and as you all have hopefully been reading, it's been another magical run to keep the
We're trying.
Yeah, it's a new wrinkle. No, Aaron, tell me about it, because truly, also, you may or may not know that Elektra is partnered with Daredevil and has also taken the Daredevil name and role, which is interesting. And also, there are parts of Matt's memory that he still doesn't have, or is that been resolved?
It's more so that the identity of Matt has gone back in the box, and most people who knew his identity before didn't know that, like, they'll know Matt, but they didn't know that he was Daredevil anymore.
So does that include somebody like Foggy, or?
I don't remember.
Well, I'm going to get into Foggy and get everybody's observation.
That's the problem of being the only artist on a panel of writers. Well,
you got David as well.
Not the only artist, but the only one that hasn't taken the mantle of a writer.
Well, what intrigued you about drawing Daredevil and getting the gig?
Honestly, it was the challenge of it, because Daredevil is such a noir genre. A lot of my career has been in space and with fantastical superheroes, and drawing street level. A lot of street level comic heroes didn't really appeal to me growing up. As just the idea of, like, vigilantism in general. But Matt in particular, he's the hero who made himself. His superpowers aren't making him stronger. They aren't like a spider sense necessarily. They're literally a handicap that he himself, the core of his body and his soul, has utilized to become a hero, which makes him the most fascinating street level hero to me, anyway.
I'm with you.
Yeah. But the challenge of drawing, like, having that noir feel with my more campy, silly art, and try to blend that in a way that hasn't been done before. I think, outside of David Mack, I would say that there's a very known visual language to Daredevil.
Sure.
And so I've tried to incorporate that, but also just make it my own.
I love what you're doing. It's fantastic. I hope there are people that are reading the current arc. Also, we've got a microphone set up, so I hope you have questions. I can talk to these guys for the whole hour, but obviously this is your opportunity to ask. And, listen, obviously they represent more than Daredevil, and I'll even say, because I'm running the damn panel, like, it doesn't have to be a Daredevil question. But please, if you have questions and stuff. Aaron, I'm glad you mentioned it, because obviously there's a choreography to Daredevil action scenes as opposed to just your classic slugfest and everything. And so, when doing that, are you, how much leeway do you get in terms of choreographing how the fight scenes look?
I don't know how much leeway I get. It's more about the leeway I take.
Attaboy.
Scripts are suggestions, right?
Yeah. Sure they are.
Making friends. No, but that's the cool thing about drawing Daredevil is that he is so sensory, and to be able to capture the physicality, the movements in the body in a two-dimensional form, but have it follow through and have you feel it. That's the hard part, or that's the thing you got to do to have it carry over. So
it's funny, and rereading a couple things from everybody. One of the aspects, and I'm really glad you get into the sensory thing, because I love the panels where it's pitch dark and we're inside Matt's head, and
so do you.
A little bit of the break for the artist. Sorry, I don't have to do anything with that. There you go. But really, David and really also, but the writers too. It's kind of a jump ball thing, handling Matt's radar, and also those moments where we're in the dark and all we have is a caption box and stuff like that. So yeah, and really, I mean, I'll start with both Aaron and David, but really, if any writers have any thoughts on Daredevil's blindness and everything that way. David, any thoughts on the
on drawing blind? Drawing blind person.
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me. I read one of my introductions to. Once I read Daredevil as a kid, I was so fascinated by it. I stumbled across this Daredevil interview book called The Daredevil Chronicles, in which it's like a long-form interview between Jansen and Miller, which you didn't get a lot of back then.
Right.
And it was just an incredible discussion of them talking about their creative point of view. And there was a point where Jansen was talking about how much he related to the character, and then Frank said offhandedly, well, not many people know this, Jansen's actually blind. That's why he relates to him so well. And for like a long time, I was so confused as a little kid reading that, not knowing they were joking, and figuring out how did Jansen do that.
It's a hell of an artist.
But, so I started as a writer. If you look at the very first page of the very first issue I did, the whole page is just all this. It is a black page, but it's handwritten words, kind of in a spiral of like his senses as he's waking up to the day. And so I wanted to set that tone right from the beginning, that a visceral experience of like how this character perceives the world, because he, as much as he can relate to people on many levels, there's still a way, his best friends and his girlfriends and other people he interacts with, they're just not going to understand a lot of how he has to piece together the world. And also I wanted to set that tone because I was also kind of setting the tone of how Fisk, views the world, and then also how like Maya Echo views the world, which is going to be very different. But I wanted to show that each person kind of, has their unique perspective. So that was really important to me right from the beginning. And I tried to find like visual and poetic ways to get that across, but that were also fun and still propelled the story forward. And back then, I don't think you have to do it now. Like now, I think you have like a little like background page before the story starts. For every Marvel, it tells you what Daredevil's background and origin is or something right from the beginning. But back then, even if you look at the Born Again issues that Miller did, you notice the rule was you had to catch the readers up to what Daredevil's origin and story was in the first couple pages. you had to say, blinded by a radioactive isotope as a kid, Matt Murdock has got you. You had every issue, you had to find a clever way to catch it. The Stan's philosophy was that every issue was somebody's first issue, and you had to inform them what that was. So it was kind of a trick and like kind of a really fun challenge to find a visual and poetic way to do that wasn't just saying that over and over every issue. And like if you look at like Born Again that Mazzucchelli and Miller did with Ralph, it was a really interesting way that they did that didn't get in the way of the story but became a part of it. And so I tried to be really thoughtful about that.
That's cool. Mark, you had something?
Well, I was going to say, playing with the powers was my absolute favorite part of the book, by far, writing the book, is that just bearing in mind every moment I'm writing that book, that among other things, and having to describe through the other senses what stuff was like, or how we perceive things, he's the only superhero I can think of whose abilities become less impressive over time and technology. Because back in the day, he could read newsprint through his fingertips or whatever. We don't read on paper anymore.
That's right.
And he can't. So I always tried to. I didn't always succeed, but I tried in every issue to make sure there was a moment when his powers could do something that nobody else could do, and a moment when his powers were a handicap to him, where he could do some amazing stuff, and then he'd be caught in a stairwell and not know what floor he's on, right? Or somebody would shove a phone in his face and say, "Look, Daredevil, you got to look what's happening here," and he would have to fake his way through, bluff his way through. And so that was a lot of fun to me. There was no day that went by when I was writing Daredevil that I wouldn't be someplace and think to myself, okay, how would Matt perceive this situation, this environment, this moment, and carry that into the work?
Very cool.
John?
Yeah, please, Rob.
I got, several years ago, I had the privilege and the opportunity to have dinner with Charlie Cox, who, as you all know, is playing Daredevil. And Joe Quesada and Dan Buckley had brought me into the city to have dinner with him as kind of the Daredevil expert. This was after he had assumed the role, hadn't done any filming or anything yet, but he really wanted to know, from my background as a character, how you would play a blind man. And this is not one on a page, this is a three-dimensional guy who's doing something on film. So I talked with him for quite some time about, how I think a blind man who has radar sense would act. He wouldn't look at his watch, he wouldn't go into his apartment and turn his lights on, all those kind of things. And he was a very apt pupil, I have to say, and a very, very intelligent guy. And as anyone who's watched him playing Daredevil knows that he's done a brilliant job as Mack Murdock and Daredevil. So it was great to be able to have dinner with him.
I want to echo what Mark said. About one of the really fun things is the figuring out ways to apply the powers and the reality of Matt's world in unique ways that are like kind of fun. Because one of the things that I think really happens to when you're reading Daredevil is it's very easy to forget that Matt Murdock is blind, particularly because he pretends he's not when he's Daredevil. So to the public in the Marvel Universe, he's not a blind man. He's a sighted hero, and so he's got to always kind of figure that out. And you can, I think, as the reader, because you see this person who presents themselves as functioning very well in the sighted world, the reader forgets it too. And so it's fun, it's like a rug pull you can do. And there's a moment in, I think, my 4th issue of Daredevil when nobody remembers that Daredevil is Matt Murdock that's blind at this point, including Captain America. And so Captain America is trying to talk him through defusing a bomb, and he's like, okay, you've got the panel open, cut the red wire. and so Daredevil's like, obviously, like he doesn't know which one is the red wire because he can't see colors. And it's a way that you just sort of subvert expectations of the way a scene like that would normally play, something that we've seen a million times, but because it's Daredevil, it's different. So that's kind of a sort of way you can amp up the thrillery tension of something like that. I remember Mark did it too. There's a last splash page panel where Daredevil's in a room and there's like the sniper red dots all over him, but Matt has no idea because he can't see the red dots. And like you find ways to have these really interesting like thriller beats that could only work with Daredevil. But at the same time, you can find these really beautiful and poetic beats too. And I'm saying that I wrote one of those. It's beautiful and poetic, guys. Where Daredevil never has any idea what the phase of the moon is. So he doesn't know if it's like a full moon or a crescent moon. Like, that's just part of his existence, that it does not exist to him. And it's something that's part of all of our experience all the time. And it changes how we feel about a given day. You know, the moon, we can see the moon, he cannot. And so it's finding the ways to really make him special, because he's not a typical blind person either. So it's one of the coolest things about writing the book, and I think it's one of the reasons writers really love the challenge of it.
Yeah, excellent. There's a ton of people waiting to ask questions, so I'm going to get right to it. Sir.
All right, I'll be quick here. Thanks, everybody. Daredevil's been one of my favorite books since I was a kid. My name's Kuder. So you hit on it a little bit. John was talking about how everybody that comes onto the book kind of brings their own take. And so my question is, and this is for anybody up on the panel, what is it about the character? What is it that of this particular series that makes it so malleable for it to be able to take on like totally different takes of that particular character?
You might be the best to answer this.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that for me, I've always felt that Matt Murdock was the most human of all the Marvel characters.
Agreed.
And also, I think he has, right up there with Doctor Strange, the best origin. I think that story that Stan did in '64 with
Bill Everett.
Bill Everett, right, was just it was like a '60s gangster or '50s gangster movie with
Yes.
film noir elements to it. And,
Yeah.
and just as a kid, I mean, you learn so much about him. You feel for him because he stops this man, pushes him out of the way, and because of that, he becomes blinded and all that. But there's another thing about him, too. Daredevil can be played as both a daytime superhero in a very ordinary kind of, Spider-Man sort of way, and he can also be played, as Frank did, in a very film noirish, late night city on the docks kind of a thing. So I think there's that dichotomy there. And there's also the genius of the man who is a lawyer and tries to work and has to work during the day inside the law because he promised his father that's what he would do. And the vigilante, when he gets into the costume, he works outside the law. But he still manages to walk that fine line that he didn't break that promise to his father that he'd never use violence to solve anything. So, and it's also blind justice, too.
Blind
It's all there
justice.
with him.
Thank you very much.
Love it. Miss?
Hi, I guess this is a question for the non-lawyers in the room.
See you later, guys.
How much research, or do you guys have like consultants, or do you reach out to actually the lawyers within Marvel itself
Oh, that's even interesting. Yeah, really.
to like answer any like courtroom questions you guys have when you're writing or even drawing?
Yeah, my hip pocket weapon was Mark Guggenheim, who was also a comic
true.
writer, but also a practicing attorney.
Yep.
So he was my go-to, and he was invaluable in answering questions. I didn't always, sometimes with comic book logic, you get to bend, and you have to bend a little bit, but he was my secret writer.
I mean, I will also say I did plenty of research, just because, just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you know every last thing about the law. And a notable example was during I Run, I made the Kingpin the mayor of New York, and I had a lot of questions about the actual policy application of the mayor of New York, like how it works. And so I called up people in City Hall who were willing to, because it's like everybody likes to talk to Marvel writers because it's cool, so you get access to people. So I got a lot of here's the way the mayor applies their power in New York City, and essentially there are zero limits on there's nothing codified in New York's laws about what the mayor can or can't do, and he's largely considered the second most powerful elected position in America because of the things the mayor can do, which to me was fascinating. So.
Don't tell Eric that.
That's awesome. Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's great.
This is for all of, obviously, I think with David introducing Echo and that whole entire series, that whole entire run, but is there a particular issue or a series of issues that you guys did that still stands out to you as this was the perfect thing I did during my run?
Good question.
My next one.
I guess I'll start with that.
Yeah.
Aaron says his next one.
In retrospect, with Echo getting her own TV show, that's part of the most recognized part of that run that I did, that first story that I did. But when I was writing it, I was really kind of, I really connected to the Wilson Fisk aspect of that story. And before that, there hadn't really been much of any kind of origin of Fisk. And so I really enjoyed kind of like dealing with like his childhood and how his perspective on the world and what might have shaped him to be who he was, that kind of thing. And I remember like kind of really enjoyed sowing the seeds for that, and in the final issue with Fisk, how things were coming together for him. For me, that was like a really satisfying issue to connect to.
Is there the counterweight of the Kingpin to Daredevil? And it's so interesting because, again, he started off as this goofy Spider-Man villain, and because of Frank Miller. Ralph, did it start with Frank when he was writing, or was it when he was with Roger drawing, where we went from and in fact, there's a John Romita-looking panel of Wilson Fisk that the next panel, he's lighting a cigar, and all of a sudden, the noir aspects happen. So
no, this was Frank's idea, really, to bring Fisk in, to bring the Kingpin into the Daredevil universe, which wasn't that easy because, everybody that edits comic has a certain proprietary feeling about their characters. So to sort of transition him from the Spider-Man office over to Daredevil required some sort of political maneuvering and all that. But I won't disagree with you about one thing. I thought what Stan and John Romita Sr. did with him in Spider-Man was not goofy.
okay.
He was great. It wasn't that deep, rich characterization that Frank brought to it, but still. And I remember John Romita saying that he and Stan got the idea for the Kingpin from, what's his name, in the... Sidney Green.
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah, from Maltese Falcon, the bad guy.
Now, of course, the idea of him being 300 pounds and having it all muscle, that was strictly, that was Stan and John Romita. But the idea behind the character was from Sidney.
That's great.
From Sidney Greenstreet.
Yeah, I should have known that. I'm a big old Hollywood guy. No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I love what all of you have done with Wilson over the years. Like Charles said, making him mayor, like David said as well. And really the complicated relationship between Echo and Kingpin, the way it starts and the way it ends, frankly. And, God, love and glory, good Lord, that's all about Vanessa, Kingpin's wife, saying, you need to go straight by midnight, or we're parting. And of course, he'd do anything for his wife. So.
Well, one thing Frank wanted to do, which I had questions about, was he wanted to de-age the Kingpin's wife. Because if you look at a couple of the stories that he did, the one where she gets taken down into the...
great issues.
We talked about that, and I said, I don't know, she's been established as kind of in her mid-40s with a little gray on the sides and all that, and he just didn't like that idea. He wanted to de-age a bit. So I guess now she's has been re-aged again, right? She's kind of a little bit older now. So I don't know why he really wanted to do that, but he wanted to do it.
That's interesting. Man, I can't wait. I mean, we're all excited, obviously, for when Daredevil comes back to Disney and stuff and what they're going to do with it. It's going to be, good Lord, that Netflix show is, I'm sure we're all in agreement. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I just had a question down with the whole panel. Is there a story that you wanted to do but couldn't do, or you just didn't have a chance to do, or they got canceled? Or...
You?
No.
He's current.
No.
Aaron's current, so he's, he can talk to.
The one that I write.
There you go. The bullet in the chamber that I still have is a story in which a woman comes into Matt's office and he can see her plainly. He can totally see every feature like she was.
Interesting.
And only her. And there would have to be a reason behind why this is, and I know what that reason is, and I'm not going to tell you because I may be able to tell that story someday.
Oh, that's great. That's excellent.
That's really something.
Thank you.
Any other? Yeah, there.
The only thing I could think of was I wish Frank and David had been able to stay on Daredevil a little bit longer after they had been born again. But there were certain political considerations and things at the time, and then they just decided it was time to leave. But we did get that story incomplete, and that's the one I think people most fondly remember, I think, from that long run I had on it.
Ralph, was there any concern at the end of Born Again? Because essentially, Karen and Matt walk off, and they're Karen and Matt, and it's like, all right, we're going to live in Hell's Kitchen, and I'm happy being a fry cook, and recovering from your addictions and stuff. The end. And we knew there's going to be a next month, but was there any from editorial like, hey, what are you doing?
Well, I had a difficult time finding someone who wanted to follow Frank on there.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's still true.
Like that last panel, he basically is just going to be the guardian of Hell's Kitchen, and the rest of New York can
Go to hell.
Yeah. But what happened was I kind of lucked out because Ann Nesenti, who was not really a comic book fan, had come on staff, and I was asking people around to go, follow Miller? No way. So I managed to, I talked to her, and she said, oh, why not? She didn't really care, and she just was not, it wasn't that she wasn't impressed with it, it was that it didn't overwhelm her.
Sure.
Taken with the mythology of Frank Miller at the time. So she came on, and she had a long and a very distinguished run with John Romita Jr., and I think that's also the book in which John Romita Jr. became the artist that we know today, that fully emerged from his father's shadow. And I was very happy to have been part of that.
I think that Annie Nesenti run really, she does so many, I would never have made the choices that she makes in her run. It's bizarre in a way, but in such an awesome way that I think it ended up being exactly the right hire, because it was, everybody else would have just been trying to do what Frank did, and she was, like you said, she just kind of, I'm going to do other stuff, and the other stuff brought us incredible, really cool additions to the mythology, so it was great.
Charles, did you have a run that something you wanted to do?
It's kind of the same thing that Mark's saying, and not the same story, but I had two very awesome Daredevil stories, but I would like to think perhaps there will be a time when I tell them in the future. So
beautiful.
One is connected to his dad. The other is connected to him. So there you go.
Excellent.
There's your spoilers.
David, did you get enough of what or was there unfinished business?
Yeah, I wrote Daredevil, and I introduced Brian, and he wrote Daredevil, and then once we were both off the book, we co-wrote a series called Daredevil End of Days.
Absolutely.
And some stuff that we had thought about, the certain stuff works with Daredevil, the age he's at, but you can't do that forever, right? At a certain point, kind of the fun of Daredevil is his origin, like you said, such a great origin, but it could be the origin of a supervillain instead of a superhero, right? But just by the strength of his character, his father's teaching, he went in the right direction, right? But one of the ways I looked at Daredevil is, real people do this too. When someone in their formative years encounters some kind of trauma that shapes them in a formative way, they often spend the rest of their adult life reenacting that event, but now in a way that they control it. Because at first they were unable to control the situation. So like Batman, in his first confrontations with crime, his parents are taken away. He spends the rest of his adult life confronting crime, but now he's... Well, no, I meant as an example, Batman, right? But in a similar way, Daredevil is, he continued... people kind of do this in real life too, so that was kind of the fun of it, but at a certain point you have to get out of that cycle, or the cycle consumes you, right? So we thought, well, in Daredevil End of Days, we'll take this to the where is everybody in 20 years from now, right? Fisk and Daredevil and so on. And that was a great fun thing. And my introduction to Daredevil were the issues with the Punisher, with Miller and Jansen.
Sure.
And that made such a giant impression on me. And when I was 9 years old, it was way outside my comfort zone. And I always wanted to write the Punisher in a Daredevil story. So I got to write the Punisher in Daredevil End of Days in a really fun way. And it ended after 8 issues, but we had several other stories that we wanted to continue. And we were going to continue it in a story called Punisher End of Days, but it was still going to include the same cast that were in the Daredevil story. And I wrote the first issue to it, and I wrote the last issue to it, and I wrote kind of the beats in between. I was really happy and excited about it. We were going to do the same creative team, where it was Bendis and I writing, with Sienkiewicz and Klaus Janson doing the art like they did before. And those were guys that inspired us when we were kids, and it was amazing for them to work on our script. And we were all excited about it, and for whatever reason, it hasn't worked out. But I do still think about making that story work someday.
If only there was someone who could.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can find someone to pitch that
You
to.
guys want to write a letter?
Well, Venice isn't at DC anymore.
That story, right?
If I could just add one.
Yeah, no, I wanted you to jump in, CB, by all means.
Ralph was my first boss at Marvel when I started. I wouldn't be where I am without the lessons that he taught me. And one of them is directly related to kind of this conversation which you brought up the Kingpin. And it is in regard to the character Bullseye, which we haven't talked about.
I hope we would. Go on.
When we were younger editors, you have characters, everyone has characters they like and they don't like. We would vocalize a lot of that, oh, I hate this character, I don't want to use that character, this and that. And Ralph would always remind us that there are no bad characters. There are only characters who have not been written well yet.
Yep.
And it's a lesson I use constantly to this day. And the example you always brought up was Bullseye.
Yeah.
That, he was literally a clown before Frank took him and with a little thought and changed him into the character he is today. And he's become a staple. And we mentioned Kingpin and Elektra and Echo and all these wonderful characters have been born out of that series. But Bullseye's one that wasn't born there, but it was made the character he is today because of Frank.
Aaron, you just had him in the 8th issue of your guys' run, or?
Correct. Yeah, he's Bullseye's in our storyline and coming back.
Still a dick, still a jerk. Well, again, he's got their numbers. I mean, he's hey, guess what, Elektra? I killed you. And Matt, I killed her. And then it is those kind of
fun. There's this really great scene where we have Bullseye torturing a kid, basically, and and it's a tough kid from New York, so he's like, yeah, whatever, bring it on. You're not gonna hurt me.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. No, really, again, you're right. The way that they've changed some of these villains for Daredevil has been fascinating. Real fast, before we get to the next question from the fans, CB, there have been years where there's been a big event. Like I remember during Civil War, and Brubaker's like, I'm really telling a different story right now. Am I right? Was it Ed that was writing? Who was writing Daredevil? That was like, hey, can I not be involved in Civil War and kind of be off to the side, still doing our own thing and everything?
I don't remember. I think it might have been Ed. Yes.
Okay. All right. I don't think it was Brian. I'm pretty sure it was Ed. Yeah. So is there can a writer come to you and go, hey, something, we'd really rather not be involved, like in Blood Hunt, right?
Yeah,
the vampire thing.
We give almost all the writers a choice if they want to participate or not. Some choose to and some choose not to. There's some places where we feel that the key character has to be included that we would like to push them in. And if the writer isn't comfortable breaking their arc or their run, sometimes we'll do a side mini-series or a tie-in, and that's where that kind of stuff comes from. But really, Marvel is a creatively driven company.
Sure.
And it's always the choice of the conversation between the editor and the writer if they do want to participate or not.
Understood. Yeah. Sir. Pardon me? Next, sir. I'm not Daredevil.
Great shirt. Awesome shirt. Thank you.
So this is apologies ahead of time because it's kind of like a little bit of a multifaceted question. But Mark, in your run, one of the most significant parts of the run to me was the revelation that Matt's mother has postpartum depression.
Yeah.
And it was this big retcon and this revelation of what kind of happened with Matt's parents kind of a thing. And I guess this is also a little bit towards Ralph too. Is there a little bit of how did you come up with that concept? And then to kind of everyone else, is there an apprehension to making a major retcon or change to a character that has been around that?
Oh yeah.
The Daredevil mythos that's been around for 60 years. Is there kind of a fear of almost stepping on someone else's sandbox to make a major fundamental change to someone like that? And with yours, it really, really landed. But is there a fear that it?
Oh yeah. I mean, I really subscribe to the Hippocratic Oath. I talked about this yesterday with you. That really my feeling is I want to go in there and do no harm. And with this dovetails into the previous question, which was that we were in the middle of a Marvel event called Original Sin. And the ask from editorial was every character should learn something that they didn't know before about, or some secret should be revealed that the reader didn't know. What can you do? And I want to say it was Joe Quesada's idea, just thrown out in the room. Maybe this could have to do with Matt's mother instead of the obvious Matt's father. And we ran with that and did a lot of research and talked to a lot of mothers groups and got a really good reception on the postpartum depression issue. I was very proud of that one.
Awesome. That's cool. Very cool. Matt's parents, I covered boxing professionally for 20 years. So, and I've been a fight fan all my life. So battling Jack Murdock was an immediate love for me. And again, based on what Ralph said too, that original Daredevil story is such a classic, what you'd see in a fight movie and stuff like that, that this poor boxer has to, work for, mobsters to kind of make a living, but it's his son and his pride is on the line. He can't throw a fight. It's, again, classic boxing movie thing. And just that character that Jack Murdock had that he imprinted on Matt, that you've got to stay in school, you got to do all this stuff. It's, and it's interesting because it really, Ralph I'm wondering because, like we said, Mack started off to be a Spider-Man clone in a lot of ways, and they really didn't know what to do with him beyond not having his sight. And Radar is, it's kind of the same as Spider-Sense.
On the cover of the first issue is like, you like Spider-Man? Check out.
100%. That's right. Spider-Man's on the cover. That's absolutely right. Yeah. So Matt's parents so important to his backstory in a different way than Ben and May are to Peter. Okay. I didn't know if you had a comment up, but it's cool. If not, very good. Next. All right, we can keep going.
Yeah, David and Charles created characters that are going to be in the comic TV shows. So did Marvel consult you about their psyche or anything, get some input on the making of their mind?
Forgive me real fast, Charles, remind us, because obviously Echo, I get that, but who did you create that's going to be in the new series?
So, for those of us who didn't attend D23,
I was going to ask you, is D23 official Marvel announcement or is that private Marvel announcement?
I don't know how to answer this.
I'm looking at CB because if the trailer
Oh, come on, if it was at the conference.
If anyone from Marvel Studios are watching or listening, I take no responsibility.
Well, then the crowd can tell us if not.
As an attorney, I can say that won't do a thing. The strongly hinted at rumor that is not being confirmed by this statement is that a character named Muse from the run that Ron Garnett did is going to be a part of Daredevil Born Again.
Good.
And if that were to be true, I would say that I would be aware of the respect with which the adaptation has been handled of the character into another medium.
Wow.
I'm extremely thrilled about it. In terms of prior consultation, I can't say anything about that, wouldn't even if I could, but I am extremely thrilled about these rumors, and I think we'll all have a good time learning more together. Okay? All right.
Yeah, let me real quick. I met Charlie Cox a few months ago at another show. We talked for a bit, and I introduced myself as a Daredevil writer, and he lit up like a Christmas tree. He was so excited because this is the run. He's like, yours is the run. I took everything from it. I really love what you did. You were so great. And then he went on to describe what you did.
I met him too. We're not going to say where, how, or these things, but I met him as well. I thought he was awesome. He's clearly loves this character in a way that I would say every actor who's preparing a character probably does their homework and tries to get it right, but he takes it to another level, and it's really impressive, and he's been really cool.
That's great because, and it's funny that we should be talking about the television show because the man behind Terrificon, Mitch Halleck, is about to enter the stage and have a special presentation for us.
All right, everybody here loves Daredevil because of it, right? These talented writers and artists who make the character, the man without fear, fantastic, or terrific actually. So I have a surprise for all you people that came here right now. Let's start singing Happy Birthday to the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Daredevil himself. Let's hear it. Happy birthday, Daredevil. Happy birthday, Daredevil. All right, who wants to see him?
Come on, man. We all want to see him.
Take out the mask. Wait a minute. You're like a stunt double. You're not Charlie Cox.
Wait a minute.
Sorry about this. I was told Charlie Cox was going to be here.
Gee.
Is there a Charlie Cox in the house? Anybody, please? Anybody? Wait, there's something back here.
Hey! It's Charlie Cox.
My name is Daredevil. You got better hair than I have. Alright guys, just a quick hello. I'm back next door. See you in a minute. See you.
Real fast, Charlie. All right. No problem. Charlie Cox. Thank you, Mitch. Excellent. All right, everybody, there you go. So if you want a photo and an autograph with the man without fear, he's there for you. So that should be great. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up because the Man of Steel is waiting to take the stage next. But this is a great conversation. I'm sure I would love to continue on my own podcast with all of you individually. But great questions from the audience. Thanks, everybody, for coming out.